All right, testing. Here we go. This does not have to be broadcast quality, so I'm just going to leave the microphone lying on the table. And what we're doing here is talking with Martha Anderson, who is my mother, and this is Jon Anderson, and I'll be the narrator. But this will never be broadcast. This will just be something that Jackie and I listen to. So let's go back to where we were talking a few minutes ago, when we were talking about this house.
Oh.
So when did you and Pop buy this house?
1969.
1969. So you've been in the house, what, it's going to be 20-some years, in 26, 27 years? 26 years,
I
yeah.
think so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right, because Darren was born in 69, and he's going to be 26 years old this year. So that's about right.
I think you came for our 40th wedding anniversary, and Darren was a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, so you were telling me earlier about who originally built this house and how many people owned it before you bought it.
Well, Bjornsons, I understand, built it, and then later it was sold to Johnsons. Irene Johnson lived in this house and did much landscaping and much changing of the house. And
so she's the one that did most of the basic planning?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I always had my eye on it. I just loved the house. It was so different from what we had on South First Street that I had a yen for a house with land around it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we finally got it in 1969.
Mm-hmm. How much, do you remember how much it cost at that time?
I thought around $26,000.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. That amount was in that title that I told you about. I don't have that with me now.
Yeah.
So.
But it was about $26,000.
I thought so. Mm-hmm. And we paid for it $50 a month, I think, for a while.
That was the mortgage?
Mortgage, yeah.
$50 a month?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well,
you remember what the percentage rate was on the loan? The interest rate?
7 something.
Was it 7%?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's.
Well, we had made a down payment on it. We
Sure.
were paying on the rest of it. Yeah.
And you sold the other house to?
Verdell Hines.
Yeah, who still lives there, I guess.
Yes, she was my co-teacher at Lincoln School, and she would meet me in the hall as we were passing each other, and she'd say, "Martha, I just have to get that house." Mm-hmm. So she wanted to buy it, and she'd been very happy in it. Mm-hmm. She had come from a larger house and liked the little house very
Mm-hmm.
much.
Mm-hmm.
So she still has it. And
so she loved that house, and you loved this house.
Well, I'm sure I loved the other house too, but I always had a yen to have something a little bit bigger.
The other house didn't have any yard.
Mostly I wanted a yard, and I certainly got a yard in this one.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like 26 years ago, but that's what it is, was 69.
Mm-hmm.
Would be. Mm-hmm. It will be. 25 going on 26, yeah. Uh-huh.
So when you bought the house on South First Street, tell me how that came about.
Well, Vern went into the service, and we had been in. How we happened to buy it?
Yeah, or just what happened.
I don't just remember. We looked around and got a house that was very, very inexpensive, and it seemed like a good spot as far as where Jackie would be going to school. So.
What school did she go to?
Simmons. Uh-huh.
That was an elementary school at the time.
Yes.
Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So before moving to South First, you lived in an apartment, right?
Yes, at 224 8th Avenue Southeast at the Remdy Apartments.
Yeah.
And the Remdys, Mr. and Mrs. Remdy were an older couple, and their daughter, Bernice, gave Jackie her first piano lessons. And we were there 7 years. Jackie went into first grade and second grade, I believe. And
at that location.
Mm-hmm.
What school did she go to there? All right, so I was asking you about
where Jackie had gone to
and
school.
where Jackie went to school.
Yeah, I just remember now. It's the Garfield School, and that no longer is there. It was torn down and then made into a park area, I think. And I never go over into the Garfield area, but the years at 224 8th Avenue Southeast, where we lived for 7 years, were Very, very hot summers, the beginning of the drought.
This would have been 1933,
Well, we were
34?
married in, yes, 30, and I was still taught the year of 30, but
Now,
30
where did you live in 1930, 31 when you first got married?
at 224 East Avenue
that was
South.
your first residence?
Well, I taught school for a year, and then I came back, and we got this apartment at 224 East Avenue Southeast.
So wait a minute, you were married, and then you taught school for a year?
Uh-huh.
Where was that, in Trail City still?
Yes.
So where was Pop during that time?
In Aberdeen, working at the store.
So he stayed here in Aberdeen, and you went to Trail City.
Oh, yes.
Your first year of your marriage.
Yes.
That was kind of an unusual way to start a marriage out, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, but I found out that one of my co-workers also had a secret marriage and was teaching 7th and 8th grade, and her husband was going through medical school in Chicago, and you see, we couldn't teach if we were married at that time. So
Oh, so the marriage was a secret marriage?
yes, it was.
Oh, that's interesting.
You didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Oh, I think Jackie knows it, but I don't think you did.
So what did you do? Did you elope? I mean, how did you get
We
married?
went to Minnesota and got married
Where?
at I can't think of the town right now. You got me. Just out of Minneapolis,
Uh-huh.
and
And so you got married, what, by a justice of the peace? Or
no,
did you go
no,
to
we
a church?
found a little church, and we had a minister and an attendant that was there.
Was it a Methodist?
No, it was an Episcopal church.
Oh, yeah. Really?
Mm-hmm.
So you got married in an Episcopal church in Minnesota, and who were the witnesses at the wedding? Who?
It was a co-worker at the church, somebody I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
We just went into the church.
How'd you get there?
I think that at that time there was a streetcar that went out to that little town.
From Minneapolis?
Yes.
But how did you go to Minneapolis? On the train?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So you went on the train. So what did your families think here was going on? I mean, you
I went to visit a friend in Minneapolis,
And
they didn't know what Vern was doing.
You didn't travel together then?
No.
Oh, so you went separately. So
I think so.
So you laid these plans, you worked this all out so that the two of you would go.
Very secretive plans, yes. Uh-huh.
That's really interesting. No, I didn't know that. That's kind of adventurous. Good
Yes.
for you. So
Yes.
how long had you known Pop before you decided to get married?
I met him the first summer after I had been here a year as a freshman at Northern, and he had a secretary working for him at the sheriff's office at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, May Kale was her name, and she invited me over to her house, and I met Pops at her house with a boyfriend that she had come visiting her.
Mm-hmm.
And the fellows both came over one day, and Vern was my boyfriend after that. He was at my door.
Mm-hmm. He was working at the sheriff's office?
The girlfriend.
The girl was?
Yes.
Oh, okay. He was working at the store already, right?
Vern at that time wasn't working at Feinstein's. It was his senior year in high school.
Oh, so you met him when he was a senior in high school?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And you were also a senior in high school, or you were out of school? You were at Northern already?
No, I was at Northern already. No. I was a year younger, but a year ahead of him in school.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think he took part of his senior year over again. He wanted to get into football, and I think he stayed on for some, I don't know, but he could have graduated in December, but he stayed on for until he graduated in 27, and I had graduated from a little town in Minnesota in 1926.
What town was that?
Good Thunder.
Good Thunder, Minnesota.
Uh-huh.
Is there still a Good Thunder school in Minnesota now?
I guess so. They invited me one time to the 50th anniversary, but I didn't go to it.
How many were in your class in Good Thunder?
7.
7 people.
Mhm.
Were you the valedictorian? or
Yes,
were you-
I was a salutatorian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that? Second from the top? Or is
I
it-
guess so.
Yeah.
I gave the welcoming address, and the valedictorian was a boy, as a fellow, and he gave the valedictorian address.
Do you remember his name? No.
No, I don't.
Yeah. No, I'm not surprised if you don't. I wouldn't necessarily remember that kind of detail back 50 years either.
Yeah.
But I just wondered. I just thought you might, with only 7 people in the class.
Yeah.
Good Thunder, Minnesota.
Just 10 miles south of Mankato.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
And Pops and I went back there one time. He took a picture of me standing on the doorway of a new school had been built.
Yeah.
And well, no, I guess the new school was being built when I was there. And but anyway, that was kind of fun.
I got to take this away from you because all this stuff makes noise. If you're gonna fool with something, fool with a napkin. It's quiet.
Oh, you're going to put that on the tape?
No, the paper goes on the tape with the sounds. So anyway, let's go back to you got married in 1930, and you were married in Minnesota, and you were married secretly. So then you came back here, and nobody in your family knew you'd gotten married, and nobody in Pop's family knew.
In a very short time, I was ready to go back to school. I was married in July, and in just a little short time, I was married. And then I went back to Trail City and taught my third year.
Yeah. So when you came back here after you got married, what did you do? You just go back to your separate families and your homes?
Yes, Aunt Mel even had loaned me a dress to go on my trip to Minnesota to visit my friend, and I was married in her dress.
In Aunt Mel's dress?
She was a little short gal, and I was much taller than she, but somehow or other the dress, I liked her dress, and she told me I could take it on my trip.
Yeah. And she didn't know you were going to get
married?
Oh,
no, nobody knew, no.
Were there any pictures taken of the wedding? Was there a
photographer? Oh, no, you wouldn't dare do that.
No, but sometimes the little places like that will have somebody come in and take a couple of pictures. So you have no pictures, no record of the wedding other than
It was just on July 22nd, and it was a very, very hot day. And so heaven help me, I can't think of the name of the town. You've got me sort of spellbound. But I can't think of the town.
Well, it was a suburb of Minneapolis? Like Edina?
It's a little town. It's the county seat of Minnesota.
Of that county?
Yeah. Just
right.
like Aberdeen would be for Brown County.
Would you have them? Would you have a copy of the marriage license?
Yes, I do. I have that.
So anyway, you got married, and then shortly after that, you went back to school, and you went to Trail City. And what did Pop do then?
He probably thought he was a married man who started working hard at the store.
So he finished with high school just before you got married. Is that right?
Well, he had graduated from high school when I met him.
Oh, when you met him?
Yes, because like I say, I didn't meet him until the end of my freshman year. And then he had graduated.
He had just finished his senior year. Okay. So then he got a job at Feinstein's right away?
No, he worked for Seabright's for a while, just helping during the summer, I think.
Flower shop?
Yeah. No, Seabright's out at their nursery.
At the nursery? Oh, okay.
And I thought I was going to talk about Minnesota, and I'm talking about South Dakota.
Well, we'll go back and forth. We'll travel around the upper Midwest here.
Yes.
Because I think it's interesting. I'm interested in the fact that you didn't reveal that you were married. So when did the families? I mean, when did Aunt Mel and Uncle Lou and the others?
Well, when I came home from school of that third year that I had taught, I think that the fact that Jackie was going to arrive in September was quite obvious that I must be married.
So you were pregnant.
Yes.
At that thing. So you were pregnant already when you went back to school at Trail City, or not? In other words, you came back from being married, then you went to Trail City.
Yes.
And when that was in 1930, but Jackie was born in 1932, right?
31.
Oh, in 31. Oh, that's right. She's 11 years different from me. That's right. I forgot that. She was born in 31. September of 31. Okay. So back to Trail City. Did you come home at all during the third year?
Vern, Uncle Lou was very nice to Vern. He'd lend him a car, and he'd come to Trail City to see me.
Now, by that time, did anybody know that you were married?
No, we were just going together.
Yeah. So when did the family find out that you'd gotten married?
Like I said, when I came home from school.
When you were pregnant?
Well, at the end of the school year.
Yeah. So it became obvious that you were going to have a baby.
And I think they helped us select the apartment. But my uncle, I can still see him coming down the street, and he hardly would speak to me. He didn't like what I had done. He thought I had pulled a very dirty trick on him to get married.
Going off and getting married,
Yes.
Well, at that time, in 1930, that was probably pretty risque behavior. Now, today, it wouldn't be thought of as anything unusual.
But it was so funny that one of the other teachers was doing the same thing. The one who was, and we used to be, we'd go out for long walks and have clandestine talks about our husbands. who nobody knew.
Yeah.
But
Well, that actually was pretty bold at the time. I mean, what did you think of yourself as being sort of bold and doing something unusual or unique, or were you ashamed about this?
I don't know what. Some of our courtship days, I guess, lent itself to that decision because I think probably that there must have been a decision that either we get married or we break up. I don't know. There was something like that on the calendar, maybe. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But we were married. We did it.
And you apparently didn't have any second thoughts about it either.
Apparently not. No.
I mean, do you remember now whether you regretted it afterwards, or were you happy to be married? You were glad.
I think probably I liked the security of marriage. To me meant a security. I think probably it did. I'm not sure.
Well, it certainly did, because it lasted over 50 years.
But you see, I was living with relatives here in South Dakota, and I there was something about getting married that meant security to me. I think probably.
And the idea appealed to you, even though you knew you wouldn't be able to live together. Now, why did you decide to do it in secret? Oh, because you couldn't teach. You said you wouldn't have been able to teach.
They were not hiring married teachers.
Would you have lost you were already teaching, though. You had already.
I had taught 2 years,
a couple of years. Would you have lost your teaching job if they?
That I don't know, but I know they weren't hiring married teachers. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. So anyway, you were living with Aunt Mel and Uncle Lou.
Oh yes, they were they were like my second parents, because when I was going through high school, having the desire to be a teacher, and my uncle knew that, and whenever he'd come to visit, he'd say, "Remember, we have a teachers' college in Aberdeen, and I'd like to have you come and stay with us." And my southern Minnesota relatives did not approve of my going to South Dakota at all. But that was another.
Why not?
Just leaving the farm area and going away.
Now, where was your mother at this time?
My mother was in a sanitarium in Minnesota.
So she had tuberculosis.
She did have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was. So, when you first came to Aberdeen, do you remember what year that was?
1926.
Okay. So and then you went back and finished school in Good Thunder, or you graduated in 26.
I graduated in 26, and then I came.
Right.
See, I graduated in the spring of 26, and I came out here in August 1926.
Mm-hmm.
And I attended Northern for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Lived with my aunt and uncle.
Okay. So while you were going to school in Minnesota, who did you live with?
I stayed with some cousins, with a cousin.
So your mother was already in a sanitarium.
Yes,
she was very sick.
She was very sick.
At what point did she become ill? I mean, when did?
Well, in the flu of 1918, she never really recovered from that to take care of herself very well.
And at that time, you were only about 11 years old. Then
I was 9 at the time.
9 years old. Okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
1909. Yeah. So you really lost your mother when you were 9 years old, then, in a sense.
Well, she was still on the farm with me when I graduated from the 8th grade, which would have been a little after we had the flu. But she wasn't very well, and they had to break up housekeeping, and I went to Good Thunder to be with some cousins.
Which cousins did you live with?
Martha Pomeranke. And that was the daughter of a very favorite aunt of mine in Minnesota.
Who was that?
We called her Aunt Gusty, Mrs. Sam Raymond.
That was her formal name, was Mrs. Sam Raymond?
Yes. But her husband had died. But
her name was Gusty, as in Augusta, or
Augusta.
Yeah.
She was born in Germany.
I knew her. I met her.
Yes, I think you did.
I met her. Also, Aunt
Bertha.
Aunt Bertha.
Yes.
I met both of them.
You were just a little fellow.
Sure.
One time we had a family reunion, and you were there.
Yeah. I remember going to that family reunion. I don't know if you remember.
You cut your foot.
I cut my foot in the lake. I remember that.
I remember
my
it too.
memory. I have about 2 or 3 memories. I don't remember individual people. I don't have pictures of people's faces in my memory. But I remember cutting my foot in the lake.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing television for the first time.
At Aunt Bertha's house.
At Aunt Bertha's or at some neighbor's house, because I remember us kids looking through the window at the television screen, and it was Gorgeous George the Wrestler. It was wrestling. It was pro wrestling, and I don't know whether it was Aunt Bertha's house.
I think it was Aunt Bertha's house.
If it was her house, then we probably watched more television.
Edgar, her son, probably was interested in that, and he probably had the fights on.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It was. I remember Gorgeous George the Wrestler.
Oh dear.
That was what he was called.
Yeah.
What he called himself. But that's the first time that I have a memory of seeing television. So and how old was I then? I must have been about 9 or 10. 8 maybe.
I remember you as being about 8.
That would have been 1950 then. Would make me 8.
Probably.
Yeah. It would have been, yeah. So anyway, but I remember meeting Aunt Gusty and Aunt Bertha both. I remember going to those farms and driving around.
And we had this reunion at a lake. It was sort of a community building where you could rent them and have a reunion, you know.
Yeah, because I stepped on some kind of a bottle or glass, broken glass.
Yes, you did. It was in the water, and I felt real bad about it. I know your foot bled quite a bit.
Yeah, I put a gash in my foot. Well, see, that fixed that moment in my memory, because I do remember that. And that was a family reunion of the Geisler
The Geislers.
family.
And Uncle Lou was very instigative in promoting those, you know.
Yeah.
He would insist that we go, and that's how I got to go. I went with the Geislers, I suppose, because we didn't have a car, you know, for years
No,
and
I know.
years.
We got our first car in about 55? Or 53, something like that?
It was
It was a 49 Chevy, I remember.
Yes.
Well, no, we must have gotten it in about 1950 or 51. It was fairly new. The car was new.
Yeah, we got it through the telephone company.
I know, because I remember it was painted that sort of
Green.
olive drab green Bell telephone color.
Yeah.
But I remember when Pop brought that car home. Do you remember that? The day he brought that home? Because I'd had a big fight, or you had disciplined me for something, or I had been a bad boy.
Oh dear.
Because I was upstairs in the bedroom, and I had been sent to my room or something. I mean, I remember I was crying or some sort of traumatic experience. I don't remember what it was now. But I remember he came home with the car, and then he came upstairs, and he pointed to the car out the window. And I remember my first sight of the car was through the
From the upstairs window?
From your bedroom, from yours and Pop's bedroom window.
But it would have to be.
Over the street.
Yeah.
Because my bedroom looked out over the
Or to
back
Mrs.
end.
Moss's, huh?
Well, actually, that was Jackie's bedroom at that time.
Yeah.
And I was in the same bedroom with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Because the house only had 2 bedrooms. But I was in my bed was in with your bed in your bedroom.
Our bedroom was quite big.
Yeah. And I remember looking out the window at that car. That was my first car. That eventually became my car later on when I got into high school.
Yeah.
That old 49 Chevy. And I finally sold it to Bill Kading, who was an engineer for KABR Radio. And he took it up to a farm in North Dakota, and the last time I heard was many years ago, but I heard the car was still running. Anyway, I'm backtracking here and going back and forth. Let's go back to your, let's see, you're 9 years old, and your mother gets sick in the flu of 1918. So this
very bad.
This was a very bad flu. A lot of people got sick.
Very many people in our neighborhood died, and they didn't even have funerals for them. They buried them in just a short time. It took them.
How did you avoid? I mean, did you get sick at all?
No, I didn't. But my mother and my grandmother, with whom I lived, they both were ill. And Aunt Gusty, this favorite aunt of mine, at whose daughter's house I went to high school, she walked, I think, a couple miles to get to Grandma's and my mother's because they were so ill, and to see what was happening to me, I suppose. And I remember that a doctor from Waterville, Minnesota came. He probably would be the only call he could make, but he did come. And he looked at me, patted me on the head, and said, "Little girl, how come you don't have the flu?" But I didn't get it. But Grandma and Aunt and my mother were delirious. They were just out.
High fever.
Oh yes.
And there was nothing really. I mean, no antibiotics at that time.
Well,
nothing that could
apparently
be done.
we never heard the word, but that was a real real bad experience.
Did your grandmother survive that flu?
Yes, Grandma got better.
Now what was... Okay, so before the phone rang, I asked you about your grandmother, and she was also ill with the flu, but
Yes.
she got better. What was her name?
Henrietta
Henrietta
Splitstacer Geisler.
Henrietta Splitsteiser.
Splitsteicer, maybe.
Splitsteicer.
Steu, you know, like oil, like for boy team.
Yeah.
Splitsteicer.
Henrietta Geisler. And she was your grandmother, so she was also Uncle Lou's mother.
Oh, yes. And my mother and Uncle Lou were the two little kids at home.
They were the youngsters. The youngest
two young ones.
Your mother was younger than Uncle Lou, or
Older.
older? She was older than him. He
See,
was the youngest.
my mother was born in Germany, and Uncle Lou was born after they had come to America.
I see. When was your mother born? Do you know?
The year?
Yeah.
I don't know just exactly.
Do you remember where she was born?
I want you to shut that off a minute.
So anyway, she was born in 1840 then, according to this history here of... no.
You mean my mother?
Your grandmother. Your
Oh,
grandmother.
my grandma. Oh, yeah.
And then your mother was born in...
Emmy Elizabeth was born November 28th, 1881.
Yeah, so she was born in Germany, and she was the second youngest.
Uh-huh.
Lots of brothers and sisters. How many of these uncles and aunts did you know?
Oh, I knew Uncle Gottlieb. I did not know Aunt Mary. I know, of course, Aunt Gusty. And I knew Aunt Bertha. And Paul, that little boy, I thought his name was Johann, but they say he was Paul. And I did not know Uncle August. He died very young of TB. TB was in our family, I think, quite prevalently. And I know Uncle Fred, and of course my mother and Uncle Lou.
So there was an Uncle Gottlieb was the oldest.
Yes.
And you knew him. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I used to go to his farm and play with his son, who was about 15 when I was around 8 or 9.
Where is he now?
Well, that's the one that had the Murdo.
Well, the car museum?
Yes.
Oh, that was the uncle in Murdo. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Well.
Oh, it's in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have to ask you all these names then. This
Yeah,
is all, it's all in this stuff. You didn't know Mary, of course, because she
No,
passed
Mary
away
was an
before.
older girl, and I did not know her.
She
And
died.
Uncle August, I never knew him.
Gusty died in 1957, and Bertha died a year later in 58.
1957?
That's what it says here. For
Not August.
no, Aunt Gusty.
Oh, and Augusta, yeah. August. He died in 1911. Yeah, you see, I would only have been 2 years old.
That's August.
And I can't remember him.
No, you didn't know him.
Is this going on now?
Yeah, sure.
Oh.
So your mother, you say this is wrong here, what's in here.
When she died.
Yeah, when did she die?
About 3 years after this, they've got down. I don't know where they found this. But we figured that she died in 1937 or 8, something like that.
Well, that's quite a bit later than that
Yes,
date there.
Jackie was a little girl. I thought Jackie was only 5. She said she must have been 6 or so. She stayed with Uncle Lou and Aunt Mel while Vern and I went with a couple into the hills, and we camped. And he couldn't find us when my mother died, and so my mother they had noticed that she had died. And Uncle Lou tried to find us. He said he didn't know how to get a hold of us. We just went to the hills camping. And
This was before the days of cellular telephones.
oh, I guess so.
Sure.
I was just absolutely shocked when I came home, and he said, "Where have you been? I've been looking all over for you in the hills." I don't know to what extent he went for finding us, probably to a sheriff maybe, or somebody tried to find us. But we just didn't tell anybody where we were going. I remember we camped at the base of Harney Peak and put up a tent and stayed there for a while and then drove around the hill.
And it was during that time, and Jackie was about 6 years old.
Yeah. And
Was Jackie with you? No, she stayed with Uncle Lou.
Oh, yes.
And your mother died during that period of time while you were there. And she was in a sanitarium
Yes.
at the time.
And when I remember getting a letter, which I don't have anymore, that telling about her birth and about her death, And the letter said that it was official from the place, from the sanitarium, that it had been tubercular bronchitis, which had been...
So she'd been ill for many, many years.
Oh, yes.
Did you ever see her or visit her?
I went back. Well, the fact that I was going to high school, I couldn't see her then. I didn't have a close relationship with my mother. And it seemed that some other relatives in the family were encouraging me to go to school, encouraging me to... and, of course, I loved school, and I was going to high school. And
your mother did not encourage you?
Or
did you
not particularly.
Or you just didn't have a particular relationship with
No.
your mother? You were
but my grandmother, who did have a lot of influence over me as far as what I was doing, and would say, but you must remember that you have to, when I left 8th grade, and that started the high school, she said, you must remember you've got to be confirmed. She was very firm about religion.
And what was the religion of the
Lutheran
at the time? It was Lutheran. Yeah.
And you just must be confirmed. And of course, I had gone to Lutheran school, to Lutheran catechism with my grandmother and my mother when we went to church. But also at the same time, I had a friend in the grade school who I liked very, very much, and she would invite me to go to the Methodist youth group. We had to walk about a half a mile to get to this Methodist church. And they had such fun, and they were doing so many things that I enjoyed doing with this friend of mine. And when I think back having to sit very primly and sedately with my grandmother and mother over in Morristown on the journey to the Lutheran church, the Lutherans never left me with a longing to go back to church like the Methodists did. And of course later on when I came to South Dakota, my uncle had joined the Methodist church. And
he had?
Oh, yeah.
So he was not still Lutheran. When you got here, he was a Methodist.
No, he was a Methodist. Much to his dear mother's sorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. She was so religious, and she loved her baby son so much, and she... Ach, Louis, why would you do a thing like that?
She spoke German still, right? Mostly?
Grandma?
Yeah.
Grandma refused to learn English. We would try to teach her a few things, and when I started school, of course, I had to be bilingual because I had been taught German. But that was seemingly easy. And
when you're 5 years old, it's easy.
Oh, yes. And I'd come home from school, and I would try to encourage her to say things that I knew were English. And a few things she thought were okay. How, butter was the same in German as it was in English. So,
well, pronounced a little different. Butter.
Butter, and then when we would try to get her to say a sentence back to us, to answer us or something like that, she'd say, ach. In other words, forget it. But, we all were very, very dutiful to Grandma Geisler, and I loved her dearly. Now, the description of some of my cousins said she was cross and... I don't know what this letter said, but I thought she was she might have been unhappy. I don't think of her ever as having fun or smiling, but she was a very devoted Lutheran. She did her prayer work and her Bible work and in German, And when she'd get ready to write her Uncle Lou, her son, in South Dakota, her preparation for the letter writing was really something that fascinated me. She would get out a piece of paper, like maybe a magazine, she subscribed to the German newspaper, of course, but she would prepare a padding on her table, which we might do with like a blotter or something. She would get the Tinte, which is the as you remember from German, which is the ink and the pen, and the preparation with the paper, and then she'd get herself seated with everything ready, and she'd start out, Lieber Louis, mein lieber Louis, I think that's the way it was. Beautiful script, beautiful German script. I would love to have one of those letters. And Uncle Lou, of course, adored his mother. He was very wonderful to her, and as far as remembering her and sending gifts to her, and when he'd come to visit, she would look forward to that. And we probably have to make a special trip to Morristown to buy a few little things that were necessary for his coming, you know.
Was there ever any consideration given to her moving to South Dakota to join with him, or there was?
She came to visit one time.
Did she?
He got her to visit.
And how was that?
Well, I guess from the description it was quite interesting. They bought her a new little hat. Aunt Mel and Uncle Lou went out and purchased her a little hat. She was a very little person.
As
very little.
Like Aunt Mel, too, although there was no relationship between the two of them.
She wasn't very tall, and of course he did everything to make her stay interesting and enjoyable. But in buying her the hat, Aunt Mel went along and they bought her a cute little hat. I don't remember that so much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I was here. I think that was before I came, that she had come to visit.
But he did succeed in getting her to come to Aberdeen, South Dakota. But otherwise, going to South Dakota was like...
Oh, it would be far away.
Kind of like me going to Guam, I guess.
He got her to come one time, as I remember.
Yeah.
And then later on one time, Aunt Gusty came. And then I was married. She came up to the apartment at 8th Avenue Southeast, and she helped me prepare a duck.
A duck?
Mm-hmm. How would you prepare a duck? And she knew how, and she told me how to make the dressing, and so forth. That was Aunt Gusty.
So where are we? We were fixing a duck, which Aunt Gusty came and showed you how to fix.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well,
we're living at 224 8th Avenue Southeast.
And that was part of the experience of learning to cook and be a housewife.
She wanted to show me how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we had I think Aunt Gusty came over and ate with us. She did not like the idea that I got married, you know.
Mm-hmm. Gusty didn't.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Aunt Gusty was sort of a ruler of the family in many ways, of the whole family. She had quite a strong personality, and she did not like... She told me, "Uck, you married an old Swede."
She would rather have had you marry a German.
And she did not like Uncle Lou's wife at all.
Uh-huh.
She said no. He was a very handsome young man. When he came back from South Dakota, everybody in the neighborhood for miles around in Minnesota would come to the parties where he was a master of ceremonies, probably.
Uh-huh. But she didn't approve of your choice of a husband. Did anybody in the family approve of Vern?
Vern, not necessarily, because you see, Norwegians and Swedes did have much mixed up with the Germans, you know. So. But
you didn't care about that.
No, and I didn't particularly like the Germans myself, so that didn't, by my going to high school and staying with the Pomerankis, they weren't German either, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So.
What is Pomeranki? What is that?
Oh, probably some other Pomeranki.
Czech or Yugoslavian?
Central German, yeah.
Central Europe.
Central Europe, I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But he was a wonderful, wonderful man, and I liked... Bill was like just could have been like a big brother or a second father. He was so attentive to me and helped me get started.
Did they have children of their own?
They finally had Raymond. They had one boy. Mm-hmm.
But that was after you...
About the age of Phyllis. I was in high school when he was born. I can't remember whether I was a sophomore.
So you had been living with them for a while.
I lived with him 4 years.
Yeah.
And about the time that I was a sophomore, or maybe even a freshman, he was born January 4th.
Raymond Pomeranki.
Mm-hmm. And born at home, and his mother it was a very difficult birth, and Aunt Gusty was there to take care of her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember coming home from high school, and there was a little baby boy.
Mm-hmm. You said a moment ago that you really liked Henrietta, your grandmother.
Yes, I did.
You liked her a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that there's implications in the family history that others did not like her that well, that they thought she was stern, or they thought she was...
But she was wonderful to me.
What were some of the things that you remember her doing?
She was protective. My mother was more or less taking charge of of the outdoors, the chores, the horse, the cow, and what have you that we had on the farm. And Grandma was in the house. Grandma never did chores. Grandma had chickens, and she would sell the eggs and what have you. But she liked me, and one time she said, "Let's take a walk," and she got a stick for her cane, more or less. It was a broken stick, and we walked the entire farm. We started out at our yard, down through the pasture, down to the creek, on up the creek into a sort of a hill, and then back down home through the barnyard and to the house. And she talked to me about lots of things. I wish I had known to ask her more about Germany, but I was a little girl, and I was probably 11 or 12 at that time. But she was very, very, very attentive to me, and I liked her a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of respect for her, though. I would never think of crossing her in any way. But she was very, very nice to me, and I resented the fact that some of the cousins, but she did always seem rather stern. But
You resented the fact that some of the cousins, what?
well, that they didn't think
like her?
she was, that they thought she was cross.
Yeah. Now, who else was living there at the time when you were 11 or 12?
With our family?
Yes.
Just my mother, my grandmother, and me.
That was it.
Uh-huh.
Everyone else was gone.
Grandpa Geiser had died when I was about 4.
What, do you remember anything at all of him?
I remember the funeral. They always had the funerals in the home.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I remember a little bit about one time sitting on his lap, and why he was rather jovial. In a way, Uncle Lou reminded me later in life of that remembrance I had of Grandpa Geisler.
So did they resemble each other?
I think he resembled his father a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about it. I don't remember his illness prior to the death, but I remember this incident of sitting on his lap and stroking his beard.
He had a beard.
Yes, a long beard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
What were highlights of life like on the farm? I mean, were holidays special? Or
we attended church. We drove 3 miles to go to church.
every Sunday?
Mm-hmm.
You drove. What did you drive in?
Buggy.
Horse-drawn buggy?
Horse-drawn buggy. White horse. His name was King.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was the driver, and Grandma was the important passenger. I'm sure she was assisted around in and out of the buggy, and I guess I sat in the middle. I don't know. I remember one time going to church with must have been Easter, a hat that didn't really fit because my mother would buy them through the catalog, black patent leather shoes, and I had to go to catechism as part of that Sunday ritual. The minister presided it, and I had to...
This was Episcopal.
Oh, no.
Or Lutheran. This was Lutheran. That's
Lutheran.
right. That's,
The word Episcopal would have been out of Grandma's vocabulary.
So just the three of you lived on the farm.
Uh-huh.
For how many years?
All through my grade school.
And who worked the farm? Anybody?
You see, after Grandpa died, then Aunt Gustie's they would come over with the whatever equipment they needed for seeding or for, they more or less were farming it.
Mm-hmm.
And Grandma had a big garden, and there were a couple of acres of corn that I thought my mother had to take care of. Probably not a lot. And Aunt Gustie I think she was sending her hired men over to take care of the farm. I think they were renting it and giving Grandma the rent.
Yeah. So you lived in the farmhouse. What kind of a farmhouse was it? What do you remember about that?
A nice farmhouse.
Yeah.
It was what we call the old house where they had lived was behind this newer house. And it was a nice house. I'd like you to see it sometime.
Is it still there?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
But
Who lives on that farm now?
well, I imagine, I have no idea, but for a while Aunt Bertha's son Clarence lived there. And
What was his last name?
Morshing.
Morshing.
And but that was after I was out here in South Dakota.
Yeah.
After I was,
But what do you remember about the house?
it was I would say probably a nice farmhouse.
Outdoor bathrooms?
Oh yes,
Of course.
Of course. It had a big kitchen.
Was there a
And
table?
a pantry.
Was there a table in the kitchen?
Yes.
Yeah.
But in the dining room is where we would eat, and that was just the room. There was a big kitchen and a pantry, and a dining room, and in the dining room was a coal stove, a burner, a big coal stove, and we burned hard coal. We had to bring it in from when we kept the old house, now became a sort of a coal shed. And then the front room had sliding doors, and that was never, as far as I remember, I had no remembrance of that until my mother bought me an organ, and then I would go in to practice the organ. But as far as going into the front room to play, that was taboo. And then
So the sliding doors were always shut.
Shut.
The living room was only for...
But there was a closet off the side of the dining room where you could go through, and then to the bedroom. And Grandma's